Welcome to Channel Edge, the podcast where channel leaders share success strategies, best practices, and emerging trends. Brought to you by 360 Insights, the channel success platform.
Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Channel Edge. I'm your host, Stephen Kellum, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. And very excited to have Larry Walsh, the CEO and founder of channelnomics. And it takes me a little while to get there because it was 2112 for me for a long time. So welcome, Larry.
It was 2112 for me for a long time too.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about, are people going back to the office and the drive to remote working and what that's really going to do in the channel. And before we get to maybe some of the effects, I think we should talk about, is it real? You know, this idea that people are not going to go back to the office. I know you've got some pretty strong opinions on that.
Yeah. I mean, so, let's go with Mr. Peabody and Sherman and get in the Wayback Machine and go all the way back to April, May. And, I remember seeing one of we were all still in lockdown. We weren't even supposed to leave our homes. And I saw this meme that just made me laugh out loud. It was like, introverts, call your extrovert friends. They're suffering. And I'm sitting there like this going, wow, I might put down my book and do that. And there's, we all had different experiences, but this was extraordinarily disruptive. What I like to say, though, is that we are still in probably the greatest A/B test regarding ways of doing business that we never wanted to conduct. And that the pandemic forced us to do things that we would never have slowed down our businesses long enough to try them out and test them. We were forced to. And what did we find out? They work. And because they work, and if you look at the way that a lot of the companies in many industries are continuing, they're doing rather well. And there's recognizing, depending on where you look, there's varying studies on this, but, for the most part, the consensus is that there's a reimagining of productivity, that there is lower cost to serve, that they're actually seeing sales go up. So, and a lot of this has to do with shifts and buying patterns and servicing and fulfillment. But, for the most part, it's going rather well. And in fact, to the point of where in the channel, it was brought to us, there's an undercurrent of conversation. And then when I say conversation, I mean concern about increasing inside sales. And channel chiefs talking about this are saying that they're concerned that increasing inside sales capacity will conflict and cut into the channel. And it was brought to me for an opinion, and I rendered it, and I said, yeah, go for it. If it's good for your business, then do it. The channel is evolving. The partners will be fine. The partners have to find, they have new paths that they have to follow as well. But a lot of this is that we've learned quite well that this is possible to sustain and even thrive in.
So that's a great question, or your premise that it's possible to sustain. Will people enjoy that? Will people actually continue to go down that path? Are we going to end up in a hybrid world? Because introvert, extrovert part that you started with, there's still a lot of people who've done it that old school way.
Yeah.
As soon as they get a chance, they're going to want to go back. And there may be some drivers that may contain that for a while, but is it really going to move in that direction?
Well, okay. Let's talk about that, because I hear the same thing. I typically, 2020 was the first year that I did not fly at least 100,000 miles.
Yet you still got your status, right?
And I still have my status.
That you're coming back. And then it's going to get back.
I think I only flew, I think it was like 15,000 miles last year. And that was all in January, February.
Right.
And I hear it from people saying that, they can't wait to get back out on the roads. They can't wait they're itching for the live events to happen again. I'm hearing this from channel chiefs. I'm hearing it from partners. And I'm like going, yeah, I know you are. There's another person in this conversation that has a voice in the decision-making process, and that's the CFO. And whether the CFO is going to endorse travel the way we used to is an entirely different proposition. And I think, based on what we're seeing, is that I think that we are actually going to see CFOs clamp down on travel budgets, clamp down on event attendance, but we may see increases in correspondingly, we may be able to see increases in office to office travel or site to site travel. So where you actually have demonstrable need and activity that you can measure against. I'll give you an example. One of our clients, and this was even before the pandemic, that it wasn't something that the pandemic caused, but they cut down, they slashed their internal travel budget because they were doing QBRs at headquarters. So all the field salespeople would come in, they'd fly the partners in, they would be doing all these QBRs. And so there was this constant rotation from far-flung airports to headquarters that they looked at and they said, why are we doing it like this? And they shut that process down, shut the travel down, and saved a ton of money. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to go and have face-to-face meetings. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to getting on a plane and going to work with clients and going to work with you, Stephen, but the notion of doing 36 conferences a year, which is, I average between 24 and 36 conferences a year. Yeah, that's not in the cards anymore. At least I don't think.
So perhaps it's just going to get smarter. And
I hope so, yeah.
We can't meet, and you can't build personal relationships, and you can't make those personal connections. You just maybe need to be smarter about it.
Oh, yeah, you absolutely do. I mean, look, there's a lot of things that we can do differently. There's a lot of the level of productivity that we have as a result of just being able to do this. Look, we're recording this on Zoom. We can, from dawn to dusk or beyond, I'm on Zoom or some equivalent of it all day long. Yesterday is a perfect example. 5 a.m., my first call was with somebody in Dublin. And then my second call was a team in Copenhagen. And then I start working the East Coast, and the East Coast turns to the West Coast. And then I end up somewhere in Sydney or Singapore by the end of the day. I've never seen so many people in my life, in meaningful ways, as opposed to slogging to the airport, cramming yourself into a seat on a plane, flying 5 hours to Vegas, fighting the taxi line, getting into a smoky casino, and just sort of winking and waving at people as you pass them in the causeway. It's not the same. I mean, I actually think that
it's just cracking me up because I can visualize all of that, right? There's a great actual visualization.
Well, no, but I mean, think about it though. Look, you've done it. I've done it. We've gone to these events with hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. If you think about, back in the day back when I was a journalist, when I was doing a magazine editor, I used to come back from those things with, fistfuls of business cards. Come back and look at them. I have no idea who these people are, and you'd have to then go back out and try to establish a connection and remember what you were talking about. And then, and it started a process of building a relationship. Look, what are we doing? We're cutting out the expense of time and money for the travel by doing it this way. Think about it. How many people, if you're like me, every day you're getting, I don't know, a handful or more of LinkedIn connections or new Twitter followers. That's, people are finding you, and people find me every day. And I hear this from others, is that you get connected with people because, and actually, I think because of the personal connections, the people between are doing a much better job of making other connections. So we always talk about the power of the network, those referrals, is that, Stephen, I know some, I'm talking with somebody, I'm like going, yeah, you know what? 360 Insight would be good. Let me make an introduction to Stephen and bring him over to you. Next thing you know, you now have a warm handoff. And again, as opposed to, that, starry-eyed look across the casino floor.
Hey, well, let's go a couple directions. Let's go the influencer side, and then we'll go to the sales side. Or maybe it's even in the influencer. And actually, I'm going to use generational across both of them. But maybe we start with the influencer side. Is it generational? Because I look at a certain generation that is digital natives. And for them, this is just an extension of what they do. I mean, the furthest extreme I could use is my 15-year-old son has these great relationships with people, and he plays video games. They're his friends. He's never met them in his life, and they've gotten to know each other really, really well. It's just completely normal. Folks on the other end of the spectrum, you and myself, built these relationships. I know there was a lot of winks and passing the hallway, but we also had a lot of good conversations and learned a ton in person, and then went to an event and then talked about that event afterwards. Even if it was a scotch until 10 o'clock at night, we talked about the nuances. We listened to each other in a group environment. And there was that interpersonal relationship that we grew up on and in a way that we learned. Can we do the same thing virtually? Can we teach our partners in the channel to do the same thing virtually? Because there's a lot of them, Larry, that grew up in interpersonal relationship and events just like we did, and their world has shifted, and it's going to stay shifted according to you.
Yes, it's all according to me. No one else is saying this.
I'm just saying. It's just
no. Look, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Yeah. There is something to this. However, we experience this all the time. You and I both know, and we've heard and seen this firsthand, of seeing sales teams turn over because the guys who are selling boxes don't know how to sell packets.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily, this isn't unique. This is part of change. And yes, it's disruptive and it happened very quickly, but it was happening already anyways.
So it just accelerated it.
Oh yeah, like a lot of things that the pandemic did. There was nothing new, nothing revolutionary resulted. There hasn't been that, Mother Nature created a necessity that we filled with innovation as a result of the pandemic. What we did was we looked around and said, "Oh hell, they took away our comfort zone. Now what do we do?" And we looked around and we said, "Hey, look at all this stuff lying around on the floor. I wonder if any of that would be useful." And we picked it up, and guess what? It was. We were using Zoom or, WebEx or GoToMeeting or whatever, but, just say short scripted as Zoom, but
right.
We weren't using it like this. Now it's become a necessity. This is, when was the last time you picked up a phone? Talking on the phone, I think I can tell you in the past, I have my calendar open right here.
You mean to actually talk on my computer? Not my phone. I'm sorry, to actually talk on my computer?
Yeah. No, but I'm looking at my calendar just because I have the week view up, and I can tell you that there is probably, just off the top, there's probably 25, 30 Zoom-like calls, online meetings or online conversations. In the past week, I can tell you, I've spoken this far, 4 days in the business week, I've spoken on the phone 3 times. So that's the difference. We're going through a rapid change, but we always go through change.
Okay. If you go back a year or two, the whole digital transformation and the ability for resellers, VARs, ISPs, anybody that's out there in the channel, to get them to cross that digital chasm, it was already a stretch. And vendors are already looking at who gets the ability, as you said, to not sell boxes, but to sell cloud solutions, SaaS solutions, managed services. We're already stretching that. And you talk to certain vendors and you'd see X amount. They're not even going to make it, even if we go through enablement. This just got accelerated tremendously. And can our channels fast enough to be successful? Or can vendors in this channel space, can they move fast enough to either enable or push out those who can't get there? Because that just really got accelerated if it's not going back. And you got to plan for the next 24 months.
Okay, interesting. So here's what our research is telling us is, and this is about services. I just got off of a webinar where we're revealing some new research we did with Pax8 and 5 other vendors: Acronis, IBM Security, Microsoft, Dropsuite, and Novacos. So, okay, those are all my shameless plugs.
Well done.
Thanks. I practiced. Partners, when it comes to services, and we have confirmed this within our own research, or we have our channelnomics research, we have our client research we do, and we've confirmed this number is that the average partner in services is on a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning that for every 2 accounts that they're acquiring, they're losing 1. So that makes their retention rates somewhere around 67, 70%. It's absolutely atrocious. The vendors, though, that they're selling and supporting and they're using these tools with, they're seeing retention rates or renewal rates 95% or above. So you're looking at that saying, well, how is that possible? Why? How is it that the retention rate is higher for vendors and not lower for partners? It's because the vendors don't lose the service. The customers are changing their partners. The partners that don't service the customers effectively or provide them a good experience, a good level of service, the customer doesn't want to lose the service. They'll lose the partner and they'll just take it somewhere else. And so that's the danger. And so the vendors actually are not in a position as yet to where this is a pressing need.
That's a fascinating way to look at that, because the way you look at that user experience being a key piece of it and the services, but it's around a SaaS solution quite often, right? Which the upside to SaaS is you can plug in, it's easy to roll out, it's fast, highly configurable, a lot of it, but you can go in and out, and it is the service that is going to do, and the IP and the service that is going to be there that's going to make the difference. Let me ask you this, though. Is that still a good experience for the end user? Because that's still a waste of time for that end user not to be successful with that original partner. Even if it's simpler to unplug and plug back in, it still can't be a great use of time. And I think vendors should be concerned about that. Does that affect their net promoter score? Ultimately, does that affect the influencing of that? I just can't see that as being a good thing. Or is that just how we're going to live?
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting that's a good thing. What I'm saying is that, and there are vendors that are actually looking at this as a critical part. And the reason why I bring this into this conversation is because look what we're talking about. We're talking about work from home. And I can tell you our research is telling us we have the number. Our numbers look like, we've seen, other numbers similar to this. So we know that we're in the right ballpark, that about half of the businesses that move to work from home footing will keep at least half of their employees on a work from home footing after herd immunity. So consider that. That's not while we're going through immunization. This is after we've gone through everybody's gotten immunized and we've reopened the economies fully and we have full herd immunity that will be able to operate normally. Still going to be working from home. And again, this is a lesson that we learned. This is actually a good thing for the technology business because of 2 things. One, we're going to redistribute our workforce. So rather than having everyone concentrated in sector in high density cities like San Jose, San Francisco, the greater Boston area, New York, Raleigh, Durham, et cetera. Now you're going to have these companies redistributed because talent can be anywhere. Now we have access to people that we'd never have access to before. And we can now have people or a team in Omaha, because of all this. And so that's going to allow companies to recruit more and recruit better and get more value out of their people. It's going to redistribute the wealth of our countries, whether it's the US, Canada, or wherever, because now, the earnings from a lucrative industry can be anywhere. And the partners are actually going to play an even vitaler role because the partners are local by definition.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be able to support locally. And again, that leads me to think that we're going to continue to see more localization. You may have more local meetups, but the entire idea of having to forklift up a plane load of people, out of Sioux City, don't even know if there's an airport there, but
there is.
Seriously?
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
I've flown into a lot of the Montana and Wyoming airports.
I was going to say, it's I landed in Akron once. It was a lovely building. But yeah, no, it's there's not going to be a need for that. I think this is ultimately going to be good for us.
I think it's going to be fascinating, right? I think look at what B2C has been like, right? You got a Goodyear dealer. They focus in their localized. That's why they use localized marketing. It's part of the lexicon in TCMA in the B2C space. That's why they call it localized marketing. And that's what they try to get dealers to do. I still think it's going to be interesting, even in the localization for these partners, in the way that they're used to running events, in the way that they're used to selling. I got a question for you. So if we're going down this path, is there really inside and outside sales anymore? Can we finally get over the inside and outside? You could do a multi-million-dollar deal, do it remotely. And I know you've got data on what people are willing to spend on deals that are done virtually, and it's on the rise.
It is on the rise. It is on the rise. I will even go further than in that, is that we used to remember when when Apple first released the iPad, and all of a sudden we started seeing iPads and iPhones in the office, and people were using them as a work tool. And we said that, hey, look, this is the consumerization of the enterprise. And I remember that phrase. I was like, oh my God, that just sounds so ridiculous. And here we are 10 years later, 10, 11 years later. And what do we have now? We have the consumerization of business buyers, because the business buyer now wants the same experience as they have in their consumer purchasing. All the data that we have on this, and others have similar, there's been, studies about this, but we have data on this, and we also have, others have seen it as well, is that the average B2B buyer, regardless of the size of the business, expects to have seamless ordering, seamless, frictionless ordering, ease of payment, transparency in relationship, and expedited fulfillment. All right, well, let's put those characteristics together and give it a name. Oh, yeah, Amazon. And that's what they're looking for.
Right, but to get there, I think one of the things that's interesting, and as I sit in the incentive space, we're an incentive company. I see where incentives are being applied in the behavior modification. The transactional incentives are going away to a great degree. And it's how do you market and sell well? And one of the biggest ones I keep seeing is getting partners to align with the customer's buyer journey and that experience, and where they come into that sales cycle. And by the way, the partners can control a lot of that if they learn how to do digital marketing and learn how to work better at the top of the funnel and not just at the bottom of the funnel. But we see so much being done on the incentive side in both of those areas. And so I think there's a lot of enablement going on. Hopefully there's a lot of enablement going on.
Well, there is. I mean, I think that this is where, first, I want to say to everyone listening is that Stephen is correct, that 360 is in the incentives business and they do it quite well. So
thank you, Larry.
I, on the other hand, I'm in the intelligence and strategy business. And the thing that one of the more interesting developments we've seen, and it ties into your incentives, which is the strategy that leverages incentives to an outcome. And we have gone from very transactional reward structures, whether it's front or back end rewards, to measuring and incenting and reinforcing developmental behavior. And what I mean by that is that, we'll have deal registration. Great. You get, in the past, that would mean you register the deal, you get your approval, and you get your protection and incentive for however long the registration window is. More progressive companies are saying, yes, we'll give you deal registration, but in order to get your reward, then you have to perform these activities and document it in support of it, changing the behavior. Now you have to do, presentate. You have to show that you've done a presentation, you've set up the sales meetings, you've done the proof of concept, you've gone through the steps to warrant getting that protection. And we see that across the board with MDF programs, with services programs. And that's a really great development because it's changing the dynamic of the way that we interact. And again, it doesn't matter whether that's in person or whether it's virtual, is that these are still things that make us better at what we do. It's applying craft. A lot of that is still on the pre-sales side of the equation. And as an industry, as a technology industry, and it's like many industries, that the reward moment is the point of transaction. That point of sales is that, we've negotiated, we've identified the product, we've negotiated the terms. Now is the time to go to the register and cash out. And then there's some lip service that's paid to what happens after. And the reality is that in our virtual world and in the services-based world, what happens after the sale is as important, if not more important, than what happened before the sale. And so now we have to start applying more thinking around, well, how do we incent and reward behaviors after the sale, knowing that so much is riding on renewals and persistent engagement and having that continuity of revenue.
One, I love, you said applying craft. I think it's a great message to get out to partners in the channel about why that's so important. Sales is a lagging indicator. Well, everybody just figured that out, right? And especially in the recurring world, one of the coolest rewards I have seen is when you're rolling out your platform or your service, whatever that is, do a reward for the customer satisfaction or net promoter score across that specific area, because it's going to increase your upsell, your cross-sell, your resell. You can either win by doing all that, investing at that time, or do it okay and face losing a customer. To me, it just makes absolute sense what you're talking about, Larry. Is where do you apply those rewards pre and post-sale versus just the transactional piece?
Yeah, so I'll share with you. This actually happened this morning. I got a call from a bank that we used to do business with. We had our accounts with them, and there was an incident. They fired us, and for no reason. After we went to them and said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Well, we decided to deactivate your account." Why? We don't know. Well, can we fix this? No. I'm like, great. So we scrambled and we had to go find a new bank and to take us. And then they came back and they said, well, we can fix it. And it gave us some breathing room, but we still left. It was a really terrible experience. That was 2.5 years ago. This morning, that bank called, wondering what happened and if they could do anything better to get our business back. And I said, I'm glad you called, but no, you can't. It's like,
two and a half years late.
Well, yeah, it's like you had your opportunity. I mean, we probably would have worked with them if they just, if they'd actually had a little bit more to it. I mean, in the end, it was their mistake. They had a system error, but they were reticent to even admit that at first or correct it. They finally ended up correcting it, so we didn't have to panic in our changeover. But we ultimately still changed because of it. But that's what I mean about, what happens after the sale is that they really didn't care at the time. And that's why I was like, I didn't care about renewing, even considering going back to doing business with them. And that's the same thing with a lot of technology companies. A lot of technology companies are in that scene. The customer is willing, customers are very forgiving so long as you're attentive. They understand mistakes happen. They understand not everything is perfect. But if you're making the effort, and sometimes the effort is just being present.
Well, that goes into relationship building. And I think that's a key piece. And I'm going to wrap this around to kind of end this, and people can reach out to you and go deeper with you. Can we get the channel to build those relationships that have allowed them to make mistakes and still feel like there's a trust and a bond? Can they do it remotely as well as they used to do it when they were more on site? Kind of leave that as the final one. And if they can't, or if they can, how do vendors get that across to their channel, and how do they make that happen?
Well, I think you're starting from a premise that they were actually doing it well before all of this.
Good point.
All right. And I think that, like many things, we're human beings. We're human beings in general don't like change. We're creatures of comfort and routine. And we don't like learning new things, generally speaking. But we can't assume that it was working before just because we were doing it. I can point to any number of things that we were doing before that weren't working, and yet we'd spend billions of dollars on them. I mean, think about this for a minute, Stephen. Before the pandemic, webinars were virtually dead as a means of communication or as a lead gen or customer cultivation mechanism, right? We all knew it. I remember 15, 20 years ago, if you did a webinar, you'd have 400, 500, 600 people show up. They were new, they were novel, they were just when we gained the capabilities. 2019, if 30 to 50 people showed up, that was a win. If you got 100 registrations, wow, we got 100. And yet we spent tons of money on them as an industry, right? And look, we should have, and I've asked the question, I was like, well, what replaces it? And because we didn't come up with replacement, we just kept doing it. Now, the pandemic comes along and breathed new life into it out of necessity. And all of a sudden we did find that there's utility to this. There is value.
But they had to be better. Here's the deal. I think that not only did we figure out they needed to do them, but we needed to figure out we actually needed to do them better for a different reason, though.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, we did. I mean, a lot of this is that, and I purposely, when I do these things, I try not to. Yes, I'll still, even for this, I'll still show up with a sports jacket on, with a blazer and a shirt, and because this is business. I'm glad you're comfortable, Stephen.
Well, you have a better bookshelf than I do.
Yeah, but you have great books. I got to tell you, if anybody can read the books behind them, I've read all of those, and they're fantastic. But look, we do a lot of we had been doing a lot of things out of route that we've always done them, and there hasn't been anything to come along that was any different. So we had the budget, and we just kept spending on it. I don't think we can't allow ourselves to ascribe to convention, to be bound to things just because we know them and we're comfortable with them, and assume that that's the best we can do. These are the opportunities. When we've been talking about transformation for years. Now we actually have an opportunity to truly embrace it, and embrace it mostly out of necessity. You have a lot of air cover for doing this out of necessity now. And that's a great thing. I think this is nothing but positive comes out of this.
And that's great. So Larry, I appreciate you joining us, spending some time. For people who want to go deeper, look into some of the research that your company's doing. I know you do great research out there. What's the best way for folks to connect with you?
Come on over to channelnomics.com. And if you're still used to seeing us at the 2112group.com, it'll still get you there. Anyone needs anything, please reach out to me directly. You can find my contact information on our website, or reach out to me via Twitter, lmwalsh_cn.
Okay. Once again, thank you for joining us. Listeners, thank you for joining us today. If you have any comments, please feel free to email us at channeledge@360insights.com. If you enjoy this, please do share. Please contact with us to us and let us know anything we could do differently. We're always looking for great ideas. And please feel free to get your content at Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Apple, wherever you find your great content. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Channel Edge, brought to you by 360 Insights, the channel success platform. Subscribe now on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play, and you'll always be the first to access new episodes where channel leaders share success strategies, best practices, and emerging trends. For bookings, feedback, questions, or comments, feel free to email us at channeledge@360insights.com.